Hey everyone, it's Raj from 3CB Performance. Today's topic is Kevin Durant, who went through a series of right lower leg injuries during the 2019 NBA playoffs, including rupturing his right Achilles tendon when he returned in Game 5 of the NBA Finals after a 33-day layoff due to a quote-unquote right calf injury. That right calf injury was initially deemed mild by the Warriors medical staff, which typically indicates a grade 1 tear in the muscle, less than 25% of muscle fibers. But as KD's absence wore on, Warriors head coach Steve Kerr explicitly admitted that the injury was worse than the team originally feared. Based on the extended timetable for return, I'd venture that KD either had a grade 2 calf strain, which ranged from 25% to 75% of muscle fibers being torn, or that his injury occurred at the transition point between the calf muscle and the Achilles tendon, known as the musculoskeletal junction. We'll never know for sure, but an added data point is that we did see KD icing that lower region of his right lower leg, which may indicate the tear was near the musculoskeletal junction. Regardless, in either case, there's certainly a possibility that the initial injury played a role in the eventual Achilles rupture. The anatomy between the calves and Achilles is intricately interlinked, with the gastrocs feeding into the Achilles tendon. Each region is linked to the other like chain links, and that relationship helps distribute stress, often called stress shielding. However, when there's damage to the calf, those shields can drop down, with the Enterprise being blindsided by a Klingon bird of prey in cloak mode, resulting in increased stress on the Achilles tendon and higher risk of compensatory injury. When KD went off to push off with the right foot, which puts huge stress on the tendon on both ends, it snapped. Accordingly, the next question becomes, if the Warriors medical staff knew there's increased risk for injury along that leg, how could they let KD come back in? The reality with any rehab process, especially muscular injuries, there's a fine tightrope of risk-reward. It's inherent in the process. The Warriors training staff, led by former head of the vaunted Phoenix Suns training staff, Rick Celebrini, who guys like Steve Nash and Shaq credited for saving and prolonging their careers, took Durant through meticulous rehab protocols in which they gradually increased intensity and then assessed his response. Once he got through all those protocols and was able to participate in practice, everyone on the training, medical, basketball operations, and Kevin Durant agreed that he would come back for Game 5. For another example of that decision-making collaboration, look no further than the pivotal series-tied 1-1 Game 3, in which Klay Thompson was pushing to get back from his hamstring injury, but the training staff and Coach Kerr put the kibosh on that because the risk was too high. The rehab process is a collaborative one that takes numerous factors into account, but it also involves a lot of gray area. That doesn't mean the outcome is always going to be what you want, and that's why medical providers have to be comfortable operating in the gray, especially when it comes to the professional sports world that exists under a heavy microscope and constant pressure. In the days following the Achilles rupture, KD went to New York, where he had the surgery to repair the Achilles tendon. Because the tendon takes on so much stress, it's actually the strongest tendon in the body and has certain elastic properties, the rehab and return to play process is significantly longer than most tendon injuries, regardless of age. That being said, the rehab and return to play process has certainly improved by leaps and bounds in recent years. There's two examples in the NBA in the past 2.5 years. The first is Rudy Gay in January 2017, who came back in roughly 8 months and has performed relatively well since, with the Spurs making sure to limit his minutes early on and gradually ramp up his in-game activity. The second is KD's teammate DeMarcus Cousins, who missed nearly a year with the injury and also saw a gradual increase in minutes. Considering KD got injured so late into the NBA year, even an 8-month return would peg him into mid-March of 2020. I really believe his return date will depend on the context of the team. If he re-signs with the Warriors and Klay is tracking for a return in March to April from his ACL rupture, then there's a possibility of reintroducing KD as a team makes a playoff push. However, if he signs elsewhere or simply wants to take his time and make sure he's ready to go 1000% for the 2020-21 season, then it wouldn't surprise me at all if he uses the entire year to rehab and then begins to ramp up into his usual summer training for 2020. When he does get back, the question becomes, will he be the same KD? The reality after any surgery is that, as my NAU professor used to say, it's never the same model. The key will be gradually and methodically acclimating to games like Rudy Gay did. Additionally, KD's style of play isn't one that depends on explosiveness, but rather on an extremely high skill level, which always bodes well for longevity and post-injury performance. Lastly, and I can't stress this enough, KD has already shown a resilient growth mindset when it comes to the rupture, approaching it as a challenge rather than a setback. More and more research is showing how this mentality colors and positively impacts injury recovery. All that being said, there's an increased risk for Achilles re-rupture, and as we saw with DeMarcus Cousins, the potential for compensatory injury when he tore the quad on the same side. However, those are inherent risks, and his rehab will do everything it can to mitigate them. Personally, I can't wait to see him come back and use this as even more motivation to up his game, especially after some people questioned his commitment to winning while he was rehabbing from the initial calf injury. That's a wrap for this video. You can always find me on Instagram or Twitter at 3CB Performance. My goal is to provide you with in-depth, thoughtful, and evidence-based information, so like, comment, share, and sub to the channel. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. 3CB out.